Hello, Internet, and welcome. I'm here to talk about the IDW Collection, Volume 2 of The Turtles. I, you know, I love these covers. It's Dan Duncan, who was the initial artist for the first bunch of issues. By the time we're to this volume, he's not doing at least most of it. And I don't know. It's a great splinter. I like how they keep the artist consistent across all the covers too for these collections. It gives it a more collected feel. Um, and I just love this collection. I just kind of wanted to put something out there because I did that video for the first one. It seemed like a number of you were interested. Some of that might have just been to the idea in general, but there's so much, and it's interesting to see how quickly the series grows. Now, in the second collection, we have a lot more of kind of the micro series stuff for more side characters at this point because we've worked through the initial turtles and whatnot, and the development building on what happened in the first one. So all that's still very relevant and gives more meaning to that, I guess, and seeing where we end by the end of this collection is incredible. Now, this hardcover is like 4 trades worth of issues. There's always a little bit of play, but let's see here. This goes through issue 20, and there's actually more B material in this book than primary, it seems. And so we find ourselves in Dimension X. They bring in the neutrinos, which was really from the original cartoon show, and they make them more so freedom fighters against the Utroms. And I mean, there was an element of that in the, but they were like goofy teenagers there. It was more of a different play. Here it's taken a very different churn. We see a lot of play with the mutagen and the connection of the mutant side of things to all of the alien side of things. So all the sci-fi kind of comes through. Meanwhile, we're building this more like Bushido martial arts layer with a lot of the things going on as we learn more about the history of Splinter and Shredder that does directly date back to feudal Japan, and a lot of that is held in the last 4 issues in here, which is the entirety of the secret history of the Foot Clan, which is a beautiful play that actually is taking stuff that's built for this comic series alone and putting it forward. This whole tie to feudal Japan is great. It's playing on a lot more understanding of Japanese mythos and building that in a way that goes beyond like there were Kappa monsters that looked like turtles, which is a nice direct connection. So obviously you want to play on that, but playing more on mythology that's more relevant, like Kitsune and the fox spirits, a lot of kind of how samurai culture works, though more in the popularized sense than the true historical sense. But some of it is kind of there too, in that, like like a old samurai film, Kurosawa film or something. There's a lot of betrayal and a lot of like backstabbing politics and family that comes through. It's really interesting, and the art in there, Mattis Santaluco, obviously mispronouncing, has is my want, I guess. Just does these beautiful pages, and I remember at the time when I was first reading it, one thing I did not like about his art style was if we can kind of, yeah, there we go. All of the turtles have like these overly designed cuts for their face masks, and I still don't like it, but it just doesn't bother me as much anymore, knowing that it's not something that's going to stick around. I guess it's just it's not a huge deal, but it is oddly distracting. You see a lot, but as we move through the issues, this becomes less pronounced as well. And that was something that was really interesting going through all of these comics, was that it was really fun to see all this, and I like most of the artists, but There is one in particular. Um, I'm just grabbing his name real quick. Script by Andy Kuhn. Does pages kind of like this, I guess. And it's not terrible, I guess. But when you start looking at the faces and the details and whatnot, it's just there's always something odd. He's always doing weird things with the teeth with the turtles, and I dislike it. I had posted something on Reddit asking other fans of the series, saying basically like, you know, I'm really enjoying this reread. I'm enjoying all of it, but whenever I get to that Andy Kuhn art, I just kind of lose a bit of interest. There's something about his style in particular that just throws me off. And it was interesting to see he had some defenders. Most of them are actually pretty mild, though, saying, like, it doesn't bug me nearly as much as you, clearly, but, he's certainly not my favorite, and I always prefer other artists, which is okay. And there was a lot of people almost more violent about it, I guess, in their disagreement. And he had a couple of defenders as well. A lot of people pointing to his action scenes being there and kind of being able to capture sort of emotion or mood. It's true. I mean, he's a competent comic artist. It's not terrible. And there are a couple issues I know coming down the pipe that are genuinely terrible for art. But overall, you know, there's almost anyone else I prefer, but I mean, most of this book is there, and even those stories are so well written that it's easy to look past the art and try to look for better things within the art as well. So I think this is a great collection. Another thing in here worth mentioning is how they weave in the Fugitoid, who was kind of a different Mirage property, and Mirage didn't have a lot of properties that really stuck around or are remembered, but the Fugitoid kind of got merged in with the turtles more so. And so reimagining Professor Honeycutt and kind of taking his story and weaving it through with the Utroms, it's actually interesting to see how closely it parallels the original Mirage story and how little they actually had to change to weave it in. And then once you carry that forward into the momentum of this book, it becomes something so much more. And that was one thing that kind of came to me while I was reading through this again. Is how much I forgot. It's incredible, remembering how much I enjoyed this and how little was in the noggin. And then also seeing how this relates to some other things, because I've said it before, other people have said it, this is like the ultimate Ninja Turtles in like comparing to the ultimate Marvel with like Ultimate Spider-Man. Though in some ways, I think it's better to compare it to Ultimate X-Men, especially knowing in the next collection, a big arc that's coming up is Leonardo becoming Shredder's Chunin, his lieutenant, and him kind of coming to the dark side, very akin to how in Ultimate X-Men, Cyclops gets brought into Magneto's fold and then taken out again. It's a kind of plot idea for these ensemble ideas that seems to have come up a lot more kind of in this era, I believe. I haven't seen it too much since, but I remember that was something I saw a lot of for a while. And I think that's interesting, and also the idea of how this story is just taking all these different elements, not just like of Turtles lore, but like it's sci-fi and then it's Bushido and all that, but it's creating this layer through. So there's a lot of plot happening in any given issue, but what it seems is that there's a great editorial team kind of parsing through and saying, in this issue we need X accomplished and we need Y to happen. So that there's kind of like a few kind of beats that are for the larger story, but then the rest of the issue is the character or characters, depending on like the issue, whether it's B series or not, focusing on those elements and how they react and move through it. And so the plot is the larger compass, but it's, in order to even see the larger plot, you have to have so much character development, which means inherently the character motivations and decisions drive how the story is displayed to the reader. It's a much more long-term push for storytelling that even most comics can't even hope to have. I mean, in order to go for this kind of storytelling, you need to be going for one of those Vertigo brass rings or one of those ongoing Image books, right? Like 60 issues at minimum, or have some property like Turtles or X-Men where it's like, we're doing a retelling, a new stake, and so we're gonna say, you have at least this much, and then based on sales we'll continue. But presumably you're gonna be able to go for a while. And so you can do these long, drawn out stories with some foundation based on a few things that that work, that are going to keep people interested and hooked to see how it plays out. And that's the sort of thing I guess I just really love. I find myself going back to that kind of thing across any medium I can. The idea of stories being retold for a new age is inherently more interesting to me than just some other story. So I think that's great. And it's not just that like it's a tried and proven thing. It's that the idea of having that comparison and that contrast in and of itself is more fascinating, because it makes the work kind of have to stand up technically and in a pure entertainment sense apart from essentially itself or its basis. And so there's like, you can just think about it differently, and I like that idea. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of comic fans do inherently as well. That's why we kind of like seeing Superman's origin done again, or we like the idea of Elseworlds, where we're taking that kind of like story, these story elements we're familiar with, and you're mixing the pot with something else. Though at the same time, as much as this fascinates me, I've seen some stuff from DC recently where it's like, it's the Justice League, but medieval, so like a King Arthur's court thing. And I'm like, I don't care. We've seen that sort of thing exactly a few times now. And B, it's like, well, I don't know what it is. There's something in the air about King Arthur that's been happening a bit more recently. I've heard more about Arthurian lore. There's that Green Knight movie that just came out, and a couple other plays. Once and Future has been running for, I guess, a few years now, but continues to be a comic that is playing on that as well. And I think that's interesting, but just mapping the Justice League onto it directly is the least interesting thing for me at this point, I guess. Yeah. So, I don't know. Hope you guys are all having a good one, and let's talk comics again soon. Peace.